All I wanted was to give myself a trip for my 65th birthday. Instead, my husband called it nonsense, and my daughter told me not to cause trouble. Not once did they ask what I wanted. To them, I was just the help, a maid, a prop, a silent fixture in the background of their lives. And when I finally took that trip, he used the chance to bring his mistress home, tossed out all my belongings and screamed at me, "Get out of my house." But I just smiled because he had no idea. I was already prepared. It all started on my 65th birthday. I signed up for a senior tour group. When Walter found out, he slammed his fork onto the dining table, the metal clattering against the wood with a sharp clang that echoed through the room. "You're too old for this kind of crap," he snapped, his voice low and cold, like a teacher scolding a misbehaving child. Eliza frowned, her tone laced with disapproval. "Mom, if you really go, who's going to pick up Maisie?" I looked at them both and felt like I was on trial, my only crime being that I wanted something for myself. And in that moment something inside me shifted. I'd had enough. I didn't want to be just Walter's wife. I didn't want to be only Eliza's mom. Or simply grandma to Juniper and Maisie. This time I wanted to be me. Just me. Early that morning I went to the grocery store and filled 2 heavy bags with ingredients. After all, today was special. I wanted to prepare a proper homemade dinner to celebrate. I made Walter's favorite, creamy chicken soup. Then I roasted rosemary ribs just the way Eliza liked them. For my 2 little granddaughters I crafted their own special menu, fresh blueberry muffins and caramel pudding. And for myself I made something I'd been craving for ages, garlic butter baked crab. Walter took 1 sip of the soup, wrinkled his nose and muttered, "A little too salty. Next time ease up on the salt." Eliza shot him a look, then slipped her arm around me. "Dad, your taste buds are ridiculous. I think it's perfect. Mom's cooking has always been my favorite." She turned to me with a smile. "Actually, Mom, we were planning to take you out to a nice restaurant for your 65th. It's just, well, there've been layoffs at the company and my bonus got cut again." I patted her hand and smiled. "It's okay, sweetheart. What's cozier than home? I love having dinner here with all of you." Eliza smiled and nodded. "You're right, Mom. Come on, eat more." I smiled back and reached for my fork, ready to dig into my baked crab. Just then my phone rang. The dining room was too noisy, so I stepped out onto the balcony to take the call. It wasn't long, 10 minutes at most. But when I returned to the table, my plate was completely empty. The crab was gone. Even the shells had been cleared away. All that remained were a few streaks of sauce on the plate. I stood there for a second, scanning the table. Eliza gave me an awkward smile. "Mom, that call took a while. Come sit down, eat something." I sighed softly and sat down, reaching for another spoonful of soup. Walter, already annoyed, spoke again. "Who the hell was calling you for that long? And while you're at it, pass me the cornbread." He pushed his empty plate toward me. I instinctively picked it up and got up to head to the kitchen. "It was Nora," I said over my shoulder. "She called to wish me a happy birthday." I couldn't help but laugh. "She said we should join a travel group together. Head to DC, see the Lincoln Memorial and the Capitol. She said if we don't go soon, our knees won't make it." That trip had been a secret wish of mine for years. I'd always wanted to stand before that towering statue of Lincoln on the National Mall, to gaze across the reflecting pool and feel the echo of history. Walter had been once years ago. He'd come back unimpressed. "Nothing special about that place," he'd said. He never once asked if I wanted to go. Eliza had said she supported me traveling but always added, "Once the kids start school, we'll make it happen." Well, Juniper's in 5th grade now. Maisie's already in elementary school. But she never brought it up again. I don't blame her. Her life is a blur of deadlines and chaos. Every day is a race against the clock. Still, I knew deep down, if I kept waiting, it'd be too late for everything. So this year I gave myself a gift. A trip. To save money, I signed up for a short getaway recommended by the community senior center. 3 days, 2 nights. Meals and lodging included. The whole thing only cost $500. Nora immediately frowned. "I bet a cheap tour like that's gonna drag you through a bunch of souvenir shops." She grinned and teased. "Who knows, they might even lock you in one and force you to buy a fridge magnet." I chuckled and shrugged. "Doesn't matter. It's not like we have to buy anything. Even if they talk our ears off, we can just look around and leave." She shook her head. "Iris, you've been pinching pennies your whole life, and now, even on your 65th birthday, You still won't splurge a little on yourself. I'm happy. That's all that matters, I smiled. This trip is my gift to myself. Whatever you say, birthday girl gets the final word. Nora laughed back and said. Just then Walter put down his knife and fork, his face darkening as he stared at me. What did you say? You're really going to Washington? I paused. Yes, I am. He scoffed, his anger boiling over. At your age? Running around like a fool? Stop wasting money. His voice was cold and harsh, like a steel door slamming shut. A chill crept through my chest. Eliza quickly stepped in. Dad, don't talk to Mom like that. For a fleeting moment I felt a flicker of warmth. Maybe she was finally taking my side. But then her next words hit me like a slap. Mom, just listen to Dad, okay? Cancel the trip. Let's not stir up trouble at home. She stood up and gently pulled me back to the table, reaching for my plate, trying to help. But my hands slipped. The plate crashed to the floor, scattering mashed potatoes and macaroni all over. Walter slapped the table and sneered, You can't even handle a plate and you think you're fit to travel? The look in his eyes said it all. You've never earned $1, never contributed anything to this family. What makes you think you deserve to enjoy life? Dad, enough, Eliza said again, trying to defuse the tension. Mom, just clean up the mess, okay? Then eat something. The food's getting cold. But I didn't move. I just sat there staring at the empty plate. Cold? Is there even anything left on the table that I actually wanted to eat? Eliza hesitated. Mom, what do you mean? I mean the baked crab I was looking forward to. Did any of it survive? Walter, now livid, reached into Maisie's plate, grabbed a chunk of crab meat and flung it onto mine. You want it so bad? There. Happy now. The sauce splattered across my apron. Walter slammed his fist on the table. If it weren't for the kids, I'd teach you a real lesson right now. Then he stormed off and slammed the bedroom door behind him. I sat there looking at Eliza. Her expression had shifted. There was a trace of exhaustion, maybe even resentment. She sighed, scooped Maisie into her arms and disappeared into her room. My son-in-law, Colin, stood to the side in awkward silence, then finally said, Iris. You know, travel can get pretty expensive. I heard it could cost several $1,000s at least. Did he forget? His parents didn't just go to Washington last year. They also joined a guided tour across Europe. And not just any tour. Luxury tours, top tier, 0 shopping stops. $3,000 per person. And of course Eliza and Colin paid for it all. They've taken trip after trip, flaunting their adventures all over social media. Resort pools, French dinners, exclusive VIP tours. I sat at home scrolling through their photos and yes, I envied them. How could I not? Colin went on. Of course, we'll definitely make sure you get to travel too. Just, not right now. But I promise we will. Someday. But when have their promises ever meant anything? To me it was just another polite excuse, a way to brush me off. And I'd had enough of waiting. I have my own savings, Colin, I said almost quietly. I'm not spending your money. You don't have to worry. He scratched his head awkwardly. Iris, don't say that. Eliza and I really did promise to take you on a trip someday. It's just, things are tight right now. But once we're in a better place financially, we definitely will. I waved him off, cutting him short. I'd heard enough of these empty promises over the years. He took the hint and went silent, the room filling with a thick, awkward tension. The table was cluttered with half-eaten food, the warmth long gone, replaced by a dull chill in the air. I stood quietly and knelt down to pick up the shards of the plate I'd dropped earlier. I didn't want Juniper or Maisie running out and stepping on them. But after just 2 pieces, a sharp pain shot through my lower back. An old injury. One I'd been carrying since Maisie was born. Back then, after Eliza gave birth, the whole family was focused on the new baby. Juniper had sulked that day, hiding under the covers and crying quietly. I'd sat beside her and asked gently, "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Through her tears she whispered, "Grandma, do you and Mommy love Maisie more than me now?" My heart ached. I pulled her into a hug. "Of course not. Grandma loves you both. Always." From then on, I became left arm for Juniper, right arm for Maisie. The girls weren't heavy, but holding them both for hours every day eventually took its toll. That's how the back pain started, and it never really went away. An hour passed. The house grew quiet again. Eliza finally came out of the bedroom. When she saw the mess still on the floor, she frowned. Mom, you haven't cleaned this up yet? What if the kids come out and step on it? I looked at her and spoke calmly. You could clean it. Colin could clean it. Your father could clean it. What, are all of you infants? Is housework only my responsibility? She froze for a second, then sat beside me and gently took my hand. Mom, don't be upset. If you don't want to deal with it, we can clean it tomorrow. She paused, her tone softening. Mom, it's not that I don't want you to travel. But think about it. If you go, what about Juniper and Maisie? Who's going to pick them up and drop them off? Especially Maisie, she's closest to you. You'll miss her too, right? How about we wait a little longer? Maybe once they're older, then you can go. I pulled my hand away and looked at her, my voice steady and firm. Eliza, I've waited long enough. Do you remember? After you had Juniper, you said I'd have more free time once she started preschool, and I could finally go somewhere. But then preschool started and you said the school day ended too early and you needed me to pick her up. When I made it through to first grade, you got pregnant with Maisie. Now Maisie's in elementary school and you're still asking me to wait. I paused, my voice soft but unwavering. Eliza, I'm 65 years old. I don't know how many more a few more years I have left. I just want to go see the Lincoln Memorial. Walk around the National Mall. Is that really too much to ask? She lowered her head, her fingers nervously picking at the hem of her shirt, lost in thought. After a long silence, she muttered, But if you're not here, who's going to take the kids to school? I gave a bitter smile. He was wrong. There were other people who could help. Her in-laws were both retired. They spent every day lounging at home. They were more than capable of picking up and dropping off the kids. The problem was, Eliza just didn't want to ask. When she first got married, her in-laws had been overly enthusiastic, pressuring her to have kids, promising, once the baby comes, we'll take care of everything. You won't have to lift a finger. But once Juniper was born, everything changed. Suddenly they were too old, too tired, and taking care of a baby was more exhausting than expected. Within a month, they'd made excuses and disappeared. Eliza ended up coming back to me, frustrated and disappointed. I still remember her words clearly. Mom, you're the only one I can count on. Don't expect me to treat them kindly after this. I'll always take care of you no matter what. She'd said it with so much conviction. Now she visits them every year with gifts in hand. Pays for their vacations. Sends them on luxury trips. That bitter taste returned to my mouth. I looked at her coldly. Eliza, if you just wake up 30 minutes earlier every day, you can take Juniper and Maisie to school yourself. As for picking them up, take a day off. Have Colin take a day off. Or ask his parents. Weren't they the ones who promised to help? He stared at me, stunned, completely caught off guard. I didn't say another word. I got up and walked straight back to my room. Walter was already lying in bed, eyes closed, wearing that familiar expression, the one that said, I'm waiting for your apology. In the past, I probably would have whispered softly, I didn't mean anything by it. I was just talking about a trip. I won't go if it upsets you. But tonight I just wanted to sleep. I turned off the light and got into bed without a word. I had barely closed my eyes when a sharp pain shot through my waist. He had kicked me. The blow sent me tumbling to the floor, curling up in agony, breathless from the pain. Eliza and Colin heard the commotion and rushed over, knocking on the door. Mom? Dad? What happened? Are you okay? Before I could say anything, Walter's cold voice came from the bed. Stop pretending. Get up already. Don't make a fool of yourself in front of the kids. Eliza opened the door, flooding the room with light. She saw me still crumpled on the floor. Her steps faltered, she hesitated, almost moving to help me. But Walter barked, Leave her. Let's see how long she plans to keep up the act. She froze, hands twitching slightly, but in the end she didn't move. I swallowed the pain and slowly pulled myself up, gripping the edge of the bed. I looked at the man I had spent more than 30 years of marriage with, and felt nothing but emptiness. Our marriage had been arranged by our parents. They had praised him, said he was educated, dependable, kind. On their deathbeds they'd said, as long as he treats you well, we can rest easy. In the first year of marriage he did act decent. But after I gave birth, when my body changed, so did his face. He started criticizing me, mocking my lack of education, scoffing at how I haggled at the market, complaining that I didn't know how to dress. But how could I? I was raising a child, doing laundry, cooking, caring for the entire household. He'd come home expecting dinner on the table. Where was I supposed to find the time, the energy, or the money to make myself look presentable? He never understood that a refined life takes time and money. Yet his meager salary barely covered our needs, and he loved lending money to his so-called friends, not a single cent of which ever came back. Every time I asked him to get that money back, he'd pull a long face. They're just going through a rough patch. You want me to go chasing people for debt? What about my dignity? So I learned to stretch every dollar until it nearly tore in half. All these years I've been accommodating him, shrinking myself. I kept thinking it was because I wasn't good enough, not refined enough, not worthy enough. But now I finally see the truth. It wasn't me. It was him. He was never worth it. Walter, I want a divorce. That night I didn't say another word. I sat in the living room all night, unable to sleep. Staring at the few worn-out clothes in my hands, I began quietly packing my things. Over the years I'd barely bought myself anything new. I kept telling myself to save a little more to make things easier for the family. But now I realize how utterly wrong I was. I'd spent my entire life trapped in roles meant for other people. I became Walter's wife. I became Eliza's mom. I became grandma to Juniper and Maisie. And somewhere along the way I forgot I was also me. I paused, my gaze falling on that old, battered suitcase under the dim yellow light. I didn't want to take anything else with me. I'd made up my mind. From this day on I would live for myself, for once. As dawn broke, I grabbed my passport, bank cards, driver's license and the deed to my house, then walked out the door. I went straight to Nora's place. Nora, forget that bargain tour. We're switching to the luxury package. My treat. She stared at me, stunned, her eyes scanning me up and down. What happened? Who are you and what have you done with Iris? You're not saving it all for your daughter anymore. I gave a faint smile and told her everything that had happened the night before. Nora, I've lived such a pathetic life. I spent over 30 years taking care of Walter, and in his eyes, I'm not even a person. And the daughter I've held on to so tightly, she watched me get kicked out of bed by my husband and didn't even say a word. She couldn't even bring herself to offer me a hand. Last night was my 65th birthday and I didn't even get a bite to eat. My voice caught in my throat. My eyes blurred with tears. Nora gently patted my shoulder. Then this is perfect. You've finally seen it for what it is. From now on you don't owe anyone anything. It's time to live your own life. I wiped my face and stood tall. You're right. Starting today I'm done with their problems. Let's book the top-tier tour and hit the road. At the airport, just as I stepped out of the car and reached for my luggage, my phone started ringing. I declined the call without hesitation. Then Eliza called. I hit decline again. Nora turned to me and gave me a thumbs up. That's what I'm talking about. You're finally making decisions for yourself. Moments later, text messages came flooding in like a storm. One after another from Walter. If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back. If you dare go to Washington, don't even think about setting foot in this house again. Then Eliza's messages followed. Mom, you really left? You're actually traveling. Mom, please don't do this. Dad is really furious. Mom, you didn't even make breakfast. Juniper and Maisie are going to be late. Mom, please come back. I glanced at the screen silently, and then turned the phone off. I had finally made up my mind. My new life was about to begin. And yes, it really was a luxury tour. Everything was different. The food was exceptional, the lodging was comfortable, and every itinerary felt like it had been custom designed. Every site had reserved entry. No lines, no chaos. We even had a personal tour assistant checking in with us daily. In just a few days, Nora and I had dined in all the best local restaurants, explored countless museums and historical landmarks. We stood at the National Mall, gazing quietly at the Lincoln Memorial. We visited the Capitol, the Smithsonian Museums, the quaint streets of Georgetown. We walked nearly every iconic path in Washington, D.C. All the heaviness that had pressed on my heart for years. It felt like the wind carried it away. Walter and Eliza never called again, probably hoping that silence would make me come to my senses. But they didn't know. This time I'm not going back. During the trip, I got in touch with a real estate agent to start the process of selling the old house my parents left me. It wasn't a large house, but the location was prime, right in the city center, and there was a good chance a developer might buy it out in the near future. The agent gave me an estimate, around $600,000. I had always planned to transfer the deed to Eliza someday. But now I've completely changed my mind. Even just living off the interest would be more than enough for me to live comfortably. Why should I keep punishing myself for people who've never truly appreciated me? I originally wanted to list the house during the trip, but the agent said they'd need a few updated photos once I returned. So I held off for now. I thought Walter and Eliza would at least wait until I came back before making any moves. But on the 5th day, Eliza started texting again. "Mom, when are you coming home? I feel like I've got a new mom already. Darla from next door is practically moving in." Nora and I didn't cut the trip short. We spent a full 10 days enjoying ourselves before reluctantly boarding our return flight. As the plane climbed higher, the city, the rivers, the people below turned into a miniature map beneath our feet. Nora turned toward me. "What now? Are you really going to get a divorce?" I shook my head gently. "Nora, I'm 65. Most of my life is already behind me. I won't keep living in misery." She nodded. "If things get ugly, come stay at my place for a while." I got home around 3 in the afternoon. I walked up to the door, key in hand, only to realize the lock didn't fit. Looking closer, I saw the lock had been changed. I stood there, still gripping the key, a strange fog settling over me. Once behind this door was the home I had poured my life into building. For a brief second, I thought about calling Walter or Eliza to let me in. Then I changed my mind and called a locksmith. Luckily, I had the deed with me. Once he verified my ownership, he got to work. "New lock just installed a few days ago, and now you're replacing it again?" the locksmith muttered as he worked. "You people sure like to keep things exciting." Within minutes, the door was open and I had a brand new lock put in. But the moment I stepped inside, I froze. All the family photos of me with Walter and Eliza, gone from the walls. My clothes, gone from the closet. My toiletries, gone from the bathroom. Even the little handcrafted decorations I had placed on the bookshelf were missing. It was as if I had never existed in this house at all. I stood at the doorway in a daze until I heard a voice behind me. "Why is the door open? Did someone break in?" I turned around. It was Darla Boone carrying grocery bags. The same Darla Eliza had mentioned, the one supposedly replacing me. I didn't know what message she had sent, but it wasn't long before Walter and Eliza came rushing back home. The moment Walter saw me, he let out a cold, sarcastic snort. "So, you finally remembered how to come home? Didn't I tell you, if you walked out, don't bother coming back? You're not welcome here." I was about to snap back when Eliza quickly pulled me into the kitchen. "Mom, where have you been?" she whispered sharply. "You have no idea how chaotic things have been without you. No meals, no one to take the kids to school, the house is a mess. And the moment you left, Darla stepped right in. She's practically replaced you." She glanced at me, eyes full of subtle blame. "Mom, I'm telling you, Darla knows exactly how to get on Dad's good side. You'd better watch yourself." I pulled my hand away from hers and glanced into the living room, where Darla was arranging flowers like she owned the place. Walter immediately stepped between us, protectively shielding Darla. "What are you looking at? If it weren't for Darla, this house would have fallen apart. This is all your fault. You ran off thinking only of yourself, leaving us behind. We had no choice but to rely on her." Then he shifted his tone, eyes narrowing. "Iris, didn't you say you wanted a divorce? Then what the hell are you doing back here?" I gave a cold, slow smile. "I came back to take what's mine. Don't forget, Walter. This house belongs to me. Not you." Darla froze, her face stiffening in shock. "What?" she blurted out. "Walter, didn't you say this house was yours?" Walter's face turned ashen. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. I calmly pulled the deed from my bag and handed it to her. "Here, Darla. See for yourself whose name is on this house." She took the document, glanced at it, and went silent. After a brief pause, she turned and walked out without saying another word. Not even a glance at Walter. His face flushed a deep crimson. Furious, he kicked the couch and sent everything on the coffee table crashing to the floor. "Fine. Iris, you win. You bitter, ungrateful old hag. I'm divorcing you." I didn't flinch. "Perfect. That's exactly what I want." Eliza, startled and panicked, rushed over to stop us. "Mom, you're 65. Getting a divorce now will make you a joke to everyone. And besides, nothing actually happened between Dad and Darla. You misunderstood their relationship." He only brought her here to provoke you. Dad still cares about you. Just swallow your pride and apologize. Let's get back to normal. I yanked my arm away from her, my gaze sharp as a blade. Eliza, did you know the locks were changed on this house? Did you know our family portraits were taken down and thrown in the trash? Did you know everything that belonged to me was thrown out by your father? My voice was icy, each word deliberate and hard as stone. Eliza, I raised you for 30 years. And this is how you repay me, with silence and betrayal. You saw everything he did and said nothing. And now you want me to apologize. Fine, then hear this loud and clear. I'm not only divorcing your father. From today on, I'm cutting ties with you too. The next day, I met Walter at the law firm to sign the divorce papers. He sat there in stony silence, sullen and bitter, refusing to look at me. I looked straight at him and said, "What's the matter?" Having second thoughts about losing the uneducated old hag you've been mocking all these years. Come on, Walter. If you've got any dignity left, stop playing tough. You wanted a divorce? Then sign. His face turned scarlet, jaw clenched with rage. Fine. I'll sign it right now. Eliza stood nearby, trying to pull him back to stop him. But this time, no matter how she pleaded, she couldn't hold him back. After we signed the papers, we submitted our divorce application at City Hall. But the clerk informed us that we'd still have to wait a month for the process to be finalized. Only after the court's approval would it be official. As I heard those words, I was already counting down the days in my head, eager for it to be over. Walter, on the other hand, still wore that arrogant smirk, scoffing as we walked out. Iris, you better not regret this. Once you're divorced, what will you have? No income, nothing but your pathetic little savings. If it weren't for me supporting the family all these years, you'd have starved. Mark my words, you'll be begging me to take you back in less than a month. I didn't say a word. But the clerk behind the desk couldn't help chuckling. Wow, real-life bitter ex-husband drama? Ma'am, congratulations, you're finally free. I smiled back, calm and certain. Thank you. Walter stomped off in a fury, slamming the door behind him. I walked away in the other direction, sending the freshly taken photos of the old house to the real estate agent. That little place downtown was now worth close to $600,000. I didn't hesitate. I told the agent, you can lower the price a little if needed. I just want a quick sale. I even added a note. Technically the house is mine, but my ex-husband and his people are still inside. Might not be the easiest to clear out. The agent was unfazed. Don't worry. We've dealt with this kind of situation plenty of times. If the price is right, buyers can handle anything. Sure enough, just a few days later, the agent messaged me. Someone was interested. Even better. They specifically matched me with a buyer who was experienced in handling problematic tenants. When I met him, I saw what she meant. The man was huge, broad shoulders, tattoos running down both arms and across his back. I barely reached his chest. His voice was gravelly but direct. Lady, I heard about your situation. Don't worry. Once this place is mine, I'll make sure those people clear out fast. I couldn't help laughing. He looked rough, but I liked his straightforwardness. We signed the contract quickly. Walter must have gotten wind of it through the agency, because that's when the calls started. I didn't answer a single one. Why didn't I block his number? Because I wanted him to lose his mind, wanted him to keep calling until his fingers cramped, knowing he'd never get a reply. Just imagining his face twisted in frustration was satisfaction enough. Then Eliza started calling too. I ignored her just the same. Eventually they switched to messages. Walter's texts came flooding in. Iris, did you really sell the house? Where the hell am I supposed to live? I'm warning you, even if you sell it, I'm not leaving. I'll squat here if I have to. Pick up the damn phone. If you don't, I can't promise what I might do. Who the hell is this buyer? He brought people to throw us out. I'm calling the cops. Iris, I'm telling you now, I'm with Darla. It's too late to come crawling back. Then came Eliza's messages. Mom, did you really sell the house? What about me and the kids? Mom, please don't ignore me. I know I was wrong. Juniper and Maisie keep asking when you're coming home. Mom, if you come back, I'll make Dad apologize to you in person. I swear I'll never let Darla step foot in the house again. You're the only mom I have. Now you regret it? Too late. The truth is, I always knew Eliza could tell right from wrong. She just didn't have the courage to face it. She knew Walter held the financial reins in the family. To her, he was the pillar of the household. No matter how wrong he was, the whole family had to revolve around him. Me? I was just the unpaid housekeeper. The caretaker. The help. Who cares if the help feels hurt? Only now, when she realized I was serious about the divorce, did she start to panic. She wasn't afraid of losing me. She was afraid Darla would swoop in and claim Walter's pension and whatever assets he had left. So she tried to play the repentant daughter, hoping I'd return and restore the old order. But I didn't respond to any of their messages. I read them, then left them unread. Until the court finally sent the official divorce decree. That day I sent Walter a single message. It's time. We will be going to pick up the divorce certificate today. After 30 days apart, Walter looked like a completely different man. The once meticulous, sharp-dressed man now stood before me in a wrinkled shirt. His hair had gone noticeably grayer, and even his socks didn't match. One brown, one gray. The moment he saw me, he froze. It took him a few seconds before he finally muttered, "Iris, why do you look so stylish?" That's right. These past few weeks I had started taking yoga classes, getting skincare treatments, trying a new hairstyle, wearing well-fitted clothes. Who says age means fading away? Let's go. No more talking, I said flatly. Walter hesitated, his mouth opening and closing before he finally spoke. Maybe we should get back together? I don't want you to regret this. I glanced down at his mismatched socks and let out a cold laugh. Regret? The only thing I regret is not leaving you sooner. Walter, don't make me lose even more respect for you. And just like that, we received our official divorce papers. The house was mine. It had been my property before the marriage, so I kept it entirely. As for shared assets, there were barely any. We split a small amount of savings, each of us taking less than $10,000. When the paperwork was finalized, sunlight poured through the window, landing warmly on my shoulders. It felt like I was being awarded a medal of freedom. Walter kept his head down, his expression unreadable. I didn't spare him another glance. He and Eliza thought that without them, without financial support, I'd crumble and come crawling back. What they didn't know, I was now making more money than the two of them combined. It all started during that trip with Nora, when we stumbled upon a street performance challenge. A young man with a microphone was calling out to the crowd. Anyone want to jump in and finish the lyrics? Every correct song earns you $100. Before I could react, Nora shoved me forward. Iris, don't forget, you were the golden voice of our hometown back in the day. The young man grinned and handed me the mic. All right, ma'am, let's see what you've got. Finish the lyrics and win some cash. He started singing. At first I was afraid, I was petrified. Without missing a beat I followed. Kept thinking I could never live without you by my side. His eyes lit up. Wow. You know this one. He continued. But then I spent so many nights thinking how you did me wrong. I finished smoothly. And I grew strong and I learned how to get along. By now, people had gathered, murmuring in admiration. The young man was thrilled. Oh my God, ma'am, you're amazing. You should release an album. It wasn't the first time someone had told me that. When I was younger, people used to compliment my voice all the time. I still remember one particular night after a local community performance. A man approached me, introduced himself as a talent scout. He said I had potential, that I should audition, pursue a career in music. Iris, he had told me, your voice is powerful. You belong on a stage. I was tempted. That night I went home and told Walter about it. His face darkened immediately. He lashed out. Women who chase that kind of life are never respectable. If you even think about it, I'll divorce you. So I swallowed my dreams and let the opportunity slip away. I still remember the way that talent scout looked at me before he left. His eyes full of regret and disappointment. But fate is funny, isn't it? Decades later, here I was holding a microphone once again. The crowd around me had grown. I kept singing. I will survive, oh, as long as I know how to love, I know I'll stay alive. The applause drowned out the background music. Because this wasn't just a song. This was the sound of my rebirth. As I stood there, I felt like I had become that young woman again. The one who hadn't been beaten down by duty. The one who hadn't been trapped in a suffocating marriage. The one who still had dreams, still had fire. The one who was finally free. That day I lost count of how many songs I sang. By the end, my throat felt like it was on fire. After the performance, the young man came up to me. "Ma'am," he asked, "would you be interested in joining our band regularly? I own a bar and we'd love to have you sing a few songs each night. We'll pay you monthly." I smiled. Why not? Let's give it a try. 30 years ago, I was stuck between the kitchen and the weight of duty, chained to a family that never saw me. Now I was finally standing on a stage that belonged to me. From that day on, I became a regular performer at the bar, singing, chatting, telling stories. Within a month, business had picked up significantly. People started coming just to hear me sing, drawn by the stories I told between songs. And I received my very first paycheck, $6,000. At first I wanted to refuse. It felt like too much. But Lucas, the young man from the street performance, simply said, "Iris, this is just the beginning. The value you bring is worth far more." I thought my connection to Walter was finally over, cut clean. But then he came across a video of me singing, posted by a fan on social media. And just like that, the calls started. Messages, voicemails, one after another. I didn't answer a single one. Eliza started texting too. Eventually, she even had Juniper and Maisie send voice messages. "Grandma, I really miss you. Are you not coming back for me? Grandma, I'm Maisie. When will you come back? I really want to see you." Eliza's message followed. "Mom, I know you're upset with me and Dad, but please don't take it out on the girls. You raised them yourself." She wasn't wrong. I raised Juniper and Maisie with my own hands. How could I not care about them? So I agreed to see them, but under one condition. Walter couldn't know. Eliza immediately agreed. We met at an amusement park. Juniper and Maisie were laughing on the carousel, their faces glowing with joy. I stood nearby, watching their carefree smiles, and felt my heart soften. Eliza sat beside me and spoke in a low voice. "Mom, can you forgive me? Since you left, I've realized just how much you did for this family. Breakfast doesn't make itself. The floors don't clean themselves. Homework doesn't teach itself. I'm sorry. Truly." I stayed quiet for a moment, then asked calmly, "What about your father?" She looked down. "If you don't want to see him, we'll move out. I promise he won't show up." But I already knew the truth. When Eliza believed her father controlled the money, she didn't hesitate to take his side. She turned a blind eye to everything I endured. But now that I had money, now that I had power, suddenly she remembered me. Suddenly she was willing to turn her back on her father to keep me close. I smiled faintly and shook my head. "Eliza, I'll send you money every month, but on one condition. It's to be used only for Juniper and Maisie. And I need to be able to see them whenever I want." He paused for a moment, caught off guard. Then asked quickly, "Mom, why don't you just move in with us?" I smiled again and shook my head. "No, I'm good. I like my life now. Living alone suits me." I could tell she didn't like the terms. But she wasn't stupid. She knew refuse and she'd get nothing at all. In the end, she nodded. And my popularity only kept growing. Lucas, that young man, paid me like clockwork every month. Never late, not even once. Even better, he'd stop by during holidays with flowers and thoughtful gifts. With every new season, Nora and I would set off on a new trip. We no longer cared about the price. Only chose the best, the most luxurious tours. Nora would laugh and say, "My best friend is finally rich enough to spoil me." We traveled through mountains and rivers, laughing all the way. For once, life finally felt gentle with me. The next time I heard about Walter, it was through Eliza. He told me he eventually married Darla. He didn't have the house anymore, but he managed to get by on his pension. What he didn't expect was that Darla had been drowning in debt. Not long after the wedding, the debt collectors started calling Walter directly. He drained his savings trying to pay it off, and during a panic one day he slipped and broke his right leg. And Darla? While he was still in the hospital, she packed up her things and vanished. Never looked back. After his discharge, Walter was left all alone. He called Eliza, begging her to take care of him. But this time Eliza said no. She stood in front of me and said firmly, "Mom, I'm standing with you. Always." I didn't say a word. I just handed a box of chocolates to Juniper and Maisie, who looked up at me and burst into happy giggles. That's life sometimes. Just when you think the story has ended, another chapter quietly begins. I kept singing at the bar night after night. Old songs, new songs. Some listeners told me my voice reminded them of their childhood kitchens. Sunlight on the windowsill, their mother humming over the stove. Others said they had only come in for a casual drink but stayed because of my songs and my stories. I realized this might be the most beautiful part of life. You don't have to move mountains to make a difference. You just have to live honestly, and that's enough to bring light to others. Soon I was invited to local community events. Even the local TV station reached out asking to feature my story. From housewife to singer, their headline read. I just smiled. I wasn't anyone's inspiration. I was just a woman who finally took her life back. Sometimes Eliza would bring the girls to visit me. Juniper would help me tidy the garden, while Maisie snacked on sunflower seeds and begged me to sing. Nana, sing that song again, the strong woman one. She meant I will survive. I smiled, cleared my throat and began to sing. They sang along with me, their voices echoing through my small living room, filling it with warmth and laughter. Nora still visited often. We'd sit on the balcony sipping tea and planning our next adventure. So where to next? Germany? Switzerland? A road trip across America? I smiled and said, anywhere as long as it's not a road back. She laughed. You, my friend, are a legend now. I shook my head gently and said, not a legend, just free. I love the life I have now. I love waking up without tiptoeing around someone else's mood. I love living without fear of my dreams being mocked, stifled, or dismissed. I even started writing, putting my story into a book. A book for women still struggling in silence. For those like I once was, trapped by marriage, family, obligation. To tell them, you can begin again. 60 isn't the end. It's the moment life begins to bloom again. My name is Iris Evans, 60 years old, divorced, a singer, a woman who makes her own money, a woman who finally came back to herself. This name, this life, I've only just learned to cherish it. Sunlight spills through the window. A breeze lifts the curtain. I pick up the microphone, ready to start the evening's performance. Hello everyone, this is Iris. Let's sing something beautiful today. Life goes on. But I'm no longer the same.